Okay, I think we're right at 4 o'clock, so I'll go ahead and get started because I have a lot of stuff to cover with you. And I just want to make sure I give you as much information as I possibly can. I am going to try to pace myself. I purposely didn't have a lot of coffee this morning because anybody who knows me knows that I can speak very, very fast. And so I'm going to do my best because, especially because I get very excited about this topic, I'm going to do my very best to try to slow my speech. It's going to be a little bit different since I'm not actually getting audience the nonverbal feedbacks. But thank you so much to everybody who is joining through this way of participating. So yeah, we'll go ahead and get started. So this is building a threat intelligence program. I'm Susan Peediyakkal. I'm going to keep it in this mode because whenever I go to presentation mode, you're going to just see my presentation mode in Mac, gotta love it, and all my notes. So you won't get to see the lovely slides that I created for you. Just a quick disclaimer, these views are my own. It's not my employer's or anyone from my past employment. Everything in this was found OSINT. Usually this is a disclaimer I use when I'm giving more of a case study sort of a talk, but still just to kind of put it out there. Everything I found is open source. You'll see me give references throughout the talk as well. So you can actually look up a lot of these resources that I'm giving you, which is exactly what I want you to do. And I will just present a few, most of the lessons that I've learned from my experiences while building different threat intelligence programs in various environments, both government and commercial. So just a little bit about me and my career. I've been in threat intelligence mostly for the majority of my 16 years of cybersecurity experience. I started out in the military. I was active duty Air Force for 12 years, which is where I started doing IT work, network administration, information assurance. Cyber wasn't really a thing back then, so I'm aging myself, but it came to be, and it was a natural evolution for myself. I started at the NCIJTF, which some of you might know. It's out of DC3, which is up in Maryland. It was a fantastic place for me to start my career. Went to Mandan after that, and then Raytheon, and subsequently Booz Allen Hamilton. So if you guys want to know more about me, my LinkedIn is at the end of this presentation. I will not bore you. But a couple of the environments that I built were at the U.S. Postal Service, for the government of Abu Dhabi, and at the U.S. courts, which was, the U.S. courts was quite unique because it was absolutely 100% from scratch. I was the first threat intelligence analyst, judicial threat intelligence analyst ever hired. So that was a trip, and it was a huge learning experience, which set me up really well for my time at Booz Allen. And while I was at Booz Allen, I moved more to the commercial side, which is exactly what I wanted to do because it's very different than government. So I learned a lot there, different industries between finance, big oil and gas, email providers, telecommunications. I mean, you name it. It was intense. It was very cool to see. So most recently, though, right now I'm working at Luta Security. Some of you might know Katie Mazuris from the community. She is my direct boss. There, I'm the Director of Advisory Services. So I handle the services side of the house and all the triage analysts that fall under that, Navia being one of them. And then some of you might know Navia from WSC. And then also the threat intelligence offering that we hope to provide more of in the future. And just a little bit more about me and the organizations I'm involved in. And I always like to give this slide just so everybody can kind of see where I touch. And if you have any questions about them, please feel free to reach out and ask questions, especially about some of the certifications or educational programs that I'm involved in, because I really want to make sure that, you know, we're growing the cyber industry and making it accessible, and education is the way to do that. So like I said, now it's been a total 20 years in the Air Force, active and reserves. I founded B-Side Sacramento. Our first year was last year. It was a huge success in my book. I couldn't have asked for a better day. And I've been involved in women's cyberjutsu for a couple of years now. I was running the DC chapter with the Nova chapter with Nakia there, and we were having a great time, but I decided to step back and just be an ambassador for women's cyberjutsu. I'm a huge proponent of their mission and everything they do, which is why I'm so happy that they're having me here today. And then I sit on the board for Mental Health Hackers, which I hope a lot of you have heard of that actually, because it is a resource available to you. And please check that out. And then a bunch of other things, you know, SANS, Technologist Fellow, all this other kind of awesome stuff. So please reach out to me if you have questions about any of this. So getting into the topic. So I really like the number 3. It's actually my favorite number. So a little fun fact about Susan. So we're going to take a 3-phase approach to it. Phase 1 being design, then implementation, and then embed and optimize. And then you're going to hear me say constantly throughout this entire talk, people, process, technology. And along with that, strategic, operational, tactical. I'm just setting the stage. Please do not expect to know what all of that stuff is right now. Just know that I really believe in these like triads, and you're going to be hearing a lot of them. So 3 of the foundational projects to set the groundwork for a mature CTI program, people being one of them, it's to establish formal threat intelligence operations, process to establish formal threat intelligence program, and then technology to expand threat intelligence tools. And the strategic, operational, and tactical come into play when we're looking at it more from just the setup, right? We want to know about the internal workings of it. So this includes information that's focused on threats related to the organization's business, geography, operating environment. The information is usually acted upon by senior management and the organization. So you're thinking very, very high level, and I'm going to get more into this in a couple of other slides. Operational is where you focus on the flaws of the design and the organizational technical infrastructure, and then you help plan for more proactive actions that the technical security team as a whole can migrate to. And then technical, being the last part of the triad there, provides information on threats affecting various assets operated by the organization, including servers, applications, endpoint software, etc. This plays an important role in closing security gaps and improving policies. So if you want to think of it more as like an inverted triangle, tactical being on the bottom, tactical works off of the operational information, operational feeds everything, tactical and operational both feed everything up to strategic. Strategic is the one that communicates then with the executive leadership level of things. And you see me mention very, very tiny, the technical portion of it. Actually, I just mixed that up. I'm so sorry. Technical is the infrastructure side of it. Tactical is where you're looking at the TTPs. My bad, I'm sorry. Tactics, techniques, and procedures of the adversaries. And you're learning from your industry peers. And I'm going to speak a little bit more about that later. And then other organizations facing the threat. So you always hear strategic, tactical, operational, tactical, but technical just came into the mix recently because they realized that it should be like another entity of it. It's usually just like absorbed within these layers. There's a really great graphic at the end of this presentation that you're going to see where it brings all of this together. So I know this might not make any sense right now, and that's totally fine. Just trying to set the stage a little bit. There is a lot of questions to be asked when you're first starting a threat intelligence program. Mainly, why do you need it? So you really need to be thinking about how you can present this if, like, say you're in an organization and you're doing threat hunting, or you're a SOC tier 3 analyst or something like that, and you guys don't have a threat intel capability, or you're somebody from outside of the organization and you realize they don't have a threat intel capability. Maybe you have a threat intel capability and it's not very strong. Maybe this is just something you want to get into, and when you do get into it, you realize there are a lot of aspects of it that are missing. However you approach this, there should always be a baseline assessment done. And this is for any program that you're starting, whether it be threat intelligence, vulnerability disclosure, I mean, anything, threat hunting, whatever it is, you always want to start with the baseline. And the reason why I say that is because you don't know where you're growing from, right? Unless you establish that baseline and do an assessment of the environment that you're currently working in. So you want to get a good picture of the operational and threat landscape. You have to know where you are, your business processes, other elements of the SOC, their capabilities, what the needs are surrounding those people, process, and technology, expectations from stakeholders, which I'll get more into later. I have a great slide on that, and leadership, your network in itself, right? Like, what are you working with? One of the first questions I always ask when I go into a new environment is, how many endpoints do I have? You just have to have a good layout of everything. The sad part is when you go in asking all these questions, very, very rarely are you going to have somebody who actually knows all the correct answers right off the bat. And if you do find that person, like, make best friends with them, because they are crucial to your success. So identifying the crown jewels, when I say that, it means the mission essential people and the mission essential technology. And that's for, I mean, we're kind of going through it right now, right? I mean, not necessarily from a threat intel perspective, but you know, where we're in this time of COVID, and it's only like people who are mission essential, people, things that are mission essential need to keep going on. So it's kind of things that are identified in that way. You kind of, it's an asset management question, really. And again, if you find the person in asset management that knows all of the software or endpoints or whatever that are crucial, then make best friends with them, because they're going to give you all the answers. So when you're helping identify resources needed, you're defining the process, again, process, to establish staffing, which is the people aspect of it, and money, which is where the technology comes in, right? So have CTI teams identified and connected with their stakeholders. One of the first things you should do when you go in is make appointments with those people, whether it be leadership or the leads from other teams or people in the community. It's just building that network of people where you can get answers from. And then also afterwards, you're going to be delivering a return to them, right? This isn't just you taking a bunch of information. It's so that you can know who your audience is when it comes to all that reporting and developing intelligence. Has the CTI teams captured the intelligence requirements of their stakeholders? This is huge. And I could have done an entire 2-hour talk, workshop, whatever, on intelligence requirements alone. I really found myself going down a rabbit hole when I was creating that slide. I will try to rein myself in when I get there, because it's just so important. And then how are CTI teams contributing towards the utmost goal of the organizational risk reduction? So when you're explaining to somebody who is in leadership, like why they should be giving you resources and money and people and everything like that, one of the best ways to communicate that to them is the organizational risk reduction. So if you can show them it'll cost us less time, less money, less whatever in the long run if we just did X, Y, and Z, then you have more of a buy-in from them. You should always try to figure out how to speak their language. Like, what is it that interests them? So one of the best ways, say you're starting from like complete scratch and you have absolutely nobody there, like I was when I was at Quartz, and they don't have a program at all, it's always better to hire 1 or 2 people that have done threat intelligence before, and have them develop requirements and build out the threat profiles and design a blueprint for the team members and tools. And again, I'll explain a lot more of that later, but hiring like just a team of 7 people all of a sudden is great, but you haven't defined your requirements yet, and you don't know what your threat profile is, and you don't actually know what resources you need yet. So you might just be overstaffing to kind of just wait until those questions are answered. And then you might have actually staffed wrong. And you'll understand that more when I get to the staffing people aspect of this talk. So again, get that baseline, identify your stakeholders, your C-levels, your management, SOC players, clients. You assess your need. If there's also any government involvement, you need to be, or I'm sorry, governance involvement. So if it's like HIPAA with healthcare sector, or GDPR if you're doing business in Europe, there's the International Standards Organization, or ISO 2700, that has rules for us. There's just a lot to consider when you're setting up these programs. And I know I said that we're going to do it through design, where is it? Design, implementation, and optimize. And so the design phase just takes a long time. And that's another thing that needs to be communicated to your leadership, because they're going to think like, okay, we hired a threat intel person, like, where's our program? Why aren't we doing reports? And you might have to build the plane while you're flying it, and that's fine, but you need to communicate with them that like, there is a lot more to it than just regurgitating IOCs that you hear from the community and just developing reports right off the bat. So we're going to get into a little bit more about frameworks and standards that you want to adopt and everything. But let me move on, because I know we're short on, I don't want to be short on time. I want to make sure I hit all of this. So like I said, I like 3s. So there are 3 things that every threat intel program should always have. And these are your baseline foundations of developing your threat intel program. This is still the process side of things. And we're still in the design side. So a threat profile, and that is developing a detailed, so when you develop a detailed threat profile, it provides the organization with a clear illustration of the threats they face and enables them to implement a proactive incident management program that focuses on the threat component of risk. Again, you want to keep that risk aspect there because that's speaking their language. Collection plan. This helps you identify your gaps. You will, and there's like a spreadsheet that you can create, and basically it's like, these are all of our inputs. This is where we're getting all of our data from. You have a POC assigned to each one of those. This is also good for continuity of your program. You can see as a full picture how everything works, the orchestration of it all. And you have both internal and external data. Again, I have a graphic for that later. Like I said, POC for tools, the feeds, everything like that. It's also really good for when you want to go back and do assessments later, because you're going to have to see a good example, and I might say this again later, but we had a free feed from a government agency that was just feeding us indicators, and it sucked. Like there was absolutely no context around it whatsoever, right? So it didn't really help us, and it just actually took more of our time to use it. And then we were it was coming through Styx Taxi, which is just it's a part of the technology side of things, and having to get that whole piece implemented and into a sim and everything like that, it was just a huge mess, and it took a lot of our resources. So there was just not a return on investment, even though it was free, which is weird to say, but it just took more time and money than it should have. So, and then lastly, again, my favorite is defining the intelligence requirements. You see PIRs here, but that's priority intelligence requirements. Intelligence requirements make sure that you know CTI requirements before hiring people and buying tools and report writing. And then you can hire and purchase based on your requirements. So defining your intelligence requirements helps drive reporting. It prioritizes your work. It helps you find gaps in your analysis. And PIRs and SIRs are a little bit different, and I'll get into that when I get to that slide, but intelligence requirements are very huge. I think the statistic is only 30% of existing threat intel programs, this is from SANS, 30.3% of intel programs actually have defined and documented intelligence requirements, which is just so not right. Like that's one of the things that it's like, if I go in to interview somewhere, or if I'm going in to build something, it's like one of the first things you have to do, because it helps you understand the expectations of your stakeholders, because they're the ones who are giving you buy-in when you finalize them. So how do CTI teams identify which threats are relevant to their organizations and how to prioritize them? It's going to be through their intelligence requirements. So I'm going to go through each one of those 3 elements in more detail, because it's very important. This is a nice graphic I found in a FireEye report. I have the link at the bottom. And this shows the strategic, operational, and tactical. I'm going to focus only on the threat strategic part, because that's the part that talks about the threat profile. And it goes deeper than just who is targeting me and why, and what are their intentions and all that kind of stuff, because that speaks to the threat landscape aspect of it. But you're actually in the entire threat profile. This is for the entire organization. This isn't just like a, hey, we think APT1 is looking at us, or APT33 is doing bad stuff to us. Like, no, it's not just that, right? Like that can be included in a deeper dive report. This is, if I'm coming in as a brand new threat analyst and I want to know everything about the organization, basically, in their threat intel program, I'm going to pick up their threat profile, and it's going to give me all of that background. So it includes critical assets, the threat actors, threat scenarios, like the critical assets that I mentioned earlier about defining the crown jewels. That's all in there. It helps align CTI, threat intel, to business priorities to ensure positive return on investment. It takes informed security action by applying intelligence where it's needed. It helps discover business uses for threat intelligence. So this can go on to even like marketing and stuff like that. Develop consistent, repeatable, scalable threat intelligence operations. So it just makes sure that like you're not building a threat program for just that moment in time, that you're actually building it so that it can actually grow. And I'll show you in later slides about how you can optimize. Once you optimize, like the next step, like it doesn't just end where I leave it. And then optimize your ability to consume, analyze, and apply threat intelligence. And so that's all in the threat profile. And there's a really great SANS white paper on this, if anybody's interested in a deeper dive or understanding more about threat profiles. And I think it's just creating threat profile for organizations. You can Google it. It's a SANS white paper. It's really great. So these are all the frameworks, and I had a pretty like they were going to come in one at a time sort of thing, but since I'm in this mode, you're not going to be able to see that. So as we're developing our threat profile, one of the things that we're going to actually mention in there too is which framework we're going to be working with. And this actually helps Frameworks help give not only leadership, but your reporting and your stakeholders an understanding of what capacity you're working in, right? So if you're doing something like the CIA triad, which is like up in the top left corner, confidentiality, integrity, availability. It's a model designed to guide policies for information security within an organization. You have the ODNI cyber threat framework, which is right below it. And that one, I don't see that one as widely used. I don't think that there's anything wrong with it. It's just not a huge industry standard. The intelligence lifecycle, of course, everybody loves the intelligence lifecycle, and you should. I picked this one, even though it's more linear. I do prefer a loop because you want to see that, but I do prefer a loop, but the linear one here shows feedback, and all the loop ones, all the loop graphics I found actually were leaving feedback out. And I think that that's very, very important step. So this one is different, and everybody has a different version of it, but they all essentially say the same thing. You're looking at the direction and collection, processing, analysis, dissemination, feedback, and yeah, doesn't really change, just people draw different graphs. You have the kill chain, which is the 7 stages: reconnaissance, weaponization, delivery, exploitation, installation, command and control, exfiltration, all of these things there. And MITRE ATT&CK framework actually is builds off of the cyber kill chain, but rather than describe a single attack, it focuses on the indicators and tactics associated with specific adversaries, which is why people really love MITRE ATT&CK framework, and you should get very familiar with it if you want to be a threat intel analyst, because almost guaranteed if you're interviewing for the job, people are going to ask you about it. And then the last one is the diamond model that you see there. You can pivot off any point. That's the way it was designed. Adversary, capability, victim, infrastructure. It helps defenders track an attacker, the victims, the attacker's capabilities, and the infrastructure the attacker uses. Each of the points in the diamond is a pivot point that defenders can use during an investigation to connect one aspect of the attack to another. So it's not quite linear. It's not just a loop that you have to follow every single step. It's literally like, you know, just kind of anywhere that you want to start in the investigation, you can start on there. I included the meta features on there because I wanted to speak to that with the IOCs. Like I mentioned before, there was that feed that we were getting in, which was just literally like, it would be a domain or an IP or something just obscure, and there would be absolutely no context around it. And when I say context, this is what I'm talking about. I want to know when it was seen, how often it was seen, who saw it, you know, like just be able to put a whole story around it, because that's essentially what we are with threat intel. We're storytellers, and we need to be able to develop that full picture for everybody, including ourselves. And so those aspects really matter. And so there is actually a really great Digital Shadows article on this, 5 rules for integrating CTI frameworks. I want to move on to other things because I still have, you know, like 11 other slides at least to get to. So I want to make sure that I get to all of that. But it just talks about like picking, you know, how you would pick one and how it fits, and how you might not even use a framework on a certain analysis, but then on other analysis, you might use a couple. So again, if this is of interest in you, this is a really good starting point, and a couple of them to check out, especially MITRE ATT&CK, kill chain, diamond model, lifecycle. Let's see. Take a breath. Okay, going into intelligence requirements, I said I could do a whole 2-hour talk on this. So I'm going to try to keep this as high level as possible, so we can get through as much of this, because it is a lot. There is a lot of stuff that I want to make sure I cover here with you guys. So let's see. Intelligence requirements. I put the tactical, operational, strategic, so you can kind of see how it's built off, right? Like tactical feeds into operational, tactical and operational both feed into strategic. So I really like this graphic. But then you also see how it applies to intelligence requirements. So you're going to hear intelligence requirements, you're going to hear priority intelligence requirements, PIRs, and then there are SIRs, which is even, so PIRs are more granular than intelligence requirements. And then to get even more granular is the specific or secondary, depending on who you speak to, information requirements or intel requirements for SIR. And like I mentioned before, only 30% of programs actually have clearly defined and documented IRs. That was done through one of the annual SAM studies. So I mentioned a few reasons why you need IRs. It drives reporting, prioritizes your work, and finds the gaps. So if you have like 5 tickets come in at once and you're like, I don't know which one I'm supposed to answer first or which one takes priority, this is what helps you decide that. So you're going to look at your IRs, align that ticket with that. It might take a little bit of investigation, but then you can prioritize your work. And it also helps you because then you already had stakeholder buy-in when these were decided, right? Like you went to your leadership and said, are these okay? Do you agree with this? And so if they're like, why aren't you working on this ticket? You can be like, I'm following the intelligence requirements. And then, it doesn't always work in a perfect world, right? I mean, you just kind of hope. So, like I said, serves a few purposes, mostly in collection and the production part of that intelligence lifecycle that you see. So collection requirements, they're mostly defined by you and the threat intelligence team. Production requirements usually comes from above leadership, C-levels, and then RFIs, requests for information from stakeholders and additional management, or even your customers or clients. Requirements are important. You can helps you, like I said, I'm being a bit repetitive now, but it's very important. Will help you guide your collection and prioritization. It will help you find your gaps. You need to review them periodically because your threat landscape changes and your business line changes, right? So it might not necessarily be where everything's very dynamic, and that's just one thing to keep in mind. So like whether you do it annually, which is not a good idea, every 6 months, every quarter, whatever it is, and you're going to see it because as you align tickets and work to this and reporting, you're going to realize, you know what, we really don't use IR number 2 very much. Maybe it's not as important as IR number 4 or something like that, whatever it is. So it's functional. So you want to make sure you have physical and external exposure. So you want to be able to communicate these things correctly, right? So what type of attacks and threats do you fear most? Who are your managed service providers? The physical internal exposure that you have, like these all can help you develop your IRs. You also have visibility. So when that comes into your logs, timestamp, sender, recipient, attachments, name of the attachment, how big the attachment was, all that kind of stuff. That's part of the context I was talking about. Network logs, so you have proxies, firewalls, Active Directory logs, etc., internal and third-party passive DNS, and then endpoint visibility, what artifacts can you collect, and memory dumps, registry hives, process executions, etc. So one of the things that you want to keep in mind is, let me go back a step. It's more about like, where do you start, right? Like, because you need to start developing these, unless you're one of those 30%, which is amazing, and congratulations, that's so good. But maybe you need to review them. So one of the best places to start is you start a discussion about it, right? And like I said, it's about your stakeholders. It's about the people who are going to have vested interest in this. And so you want to reach out to them. This is part of that whole baseline meeting too. You can start getting an idea when you're in those meetings with them. Define operational environment and crown jewels. Again, it's slightly repetitive, but now this is for a different element. It's not just for your baseline, it's for you to develop your IRs. And then more focus on implementing key areas of intelligence direction. So maybe they're more concerned with company reputation than they are about their assets. I don't know why they would be, but maybe that's something really important to them. I have no idea. So you would want to know that from a leadership point of view. Then you can start compiling and refining your data. And so past incident based requirements, a business plan, geographically based where you are, the technology based requirements, vertical based requirements, like all of these things play into developing an IR. And so then you start thinking about the high level, right? This is all the strategic stuff that I mentioned or I show on this slide. And that's the business industries operation, top critical assets, potential adversaries, all that kind of stuff. It's really hard to get into in just 5 minutes. There's so much information out there. So I know I might be losing some of you right now, but just know that this is very, very important. And I want to let you know that, from all of these points. The strategic level, you're getting that buy-in from the stakeholders. The operational level, they're the ones who kind of know the nitty-gritty about your threat actors. The technical requirements are those firewalls and proxies that I mentioned. All of that feeds into your intelligence requirements. So when you're writing an IR, one of the last things I'll say about it is it has to be decision centric. So it answers one question, right? So it can't be so ambiguous to like, tell me about your threat intelligence program, or tell me about threat actors that are targeting us or something like that. That's not a very good IR, right? Because it's so vast. So you want it to be singular, a strong requirement that focuses on one question and only one question. Very specific, it focuses on one activity, event, or thing. The timeliness of it should capture the time frame for usable intelligence. Intelligence is only good if it's actionable and timely. And then you're answering using available assets and capabilities. So let's see. Good practices about this is characteristics of intelligence requirements are that it asks a question, one singular question. You update and communicate intelligence requirements regularly, like I mentioned before. There might be a potential for ad hoc requirements. I didn't really mention that, but maybe something shifts all of a sudden, like, COVID, and you need to change for some reason, you need to shift gears. So that's an ad hoc requirement, and it might be everlasting, or it might be just something that, goes away after it's done. These are documented and signed off, like I mentioned, by the stakeholders, and they're reviewed periodically through business and because the business and threat landscape are very dynamic. Okay. So enough about intelligence requirements. Again, something you can Google, lots of information out there. I mean, I've seen talks about this. I've seen workshops on this. It takes a really long time to define them. Don't think that like you're going to go to your stakeholders and have one meeting and then be able to give them a list and then they're going to be super happy with it and then you're going to be able to go. If that happens, that's amazing. And I want to, come work in that environment because that's awesome. So this isn't a very exciting slide, and it's because reporting isn't very exciting. It's about intelligence dissemination and feedback, and it's usually one of the weakest parts of the intelligence cycle that I showed you earlier. Report writing is one of the most critical skills of a threat and intelligence analyst, and it's because if we can't communicate it and document it, then what good is it to us? It's also talking at that strategic and operational level that we want to always make sure that we're at, right? Tactical, and again, when I get to the people side of this, I'll talk a little bit more about it, but tactical, when you're hiring this, that's kind of like a tier 1 aspect. So you're thinking about the people who are reading the reports, because all it seems like we do is taking and reporting and vetting IOCs and or gleaning and vetting IOCs and et cetera. And so that's the tactical level, right? Like they're the ones doing all the intelligence gathering, really. And then operational kind of comes in and does a deeper dive and starts forming that bigger picture and starting to tell a story. And then strategic comes in and takes all of that information and puts it together so that they can communicate it to the stakeholders and C-levels and everybody like that. So it's a huge aspect of our job, the report writing. One of the things that I always tell everybody when they first come into a threat intelligence program is to read this book, Psychology of Intelligence Analysis by Dr. Hewer. It's a very dry read, but it's very good. It talks about the structured analytical techniques and everything like that. And most people who have a an intelligence background have heard it or read this book. It's available for free online. Don't think you have to go buy it. You can just Google the title and it'll come up with a PDF. So it's out there, it's available. And if not, then email me. My email's at the end of this and I'll send you a copy of it. So the intelligence requirements that we just talked of help with the production of report writing. So there's a method to my madness here. You want to start creating structures for your report templates and have a style that is cohesive across your team. Even though a bunch of different people might be writing different reports, you want it to be cohesive. You want it to have tradecraft to it. So this Intel community analytical standards, just make sure there's a cohesiveness. So when I say this, it's because if I write a report at US courts, I don't want it to go somewhere and then be like, what the heck is this? I want them to be able to see that there's a natural flow to it and probably very similar to the one that they're using. So it would be easier for people in my community and my industry to ingest. because it's all about sharing's caring for sure. And I know people get very like, I need to keep my intel to myself. Like it's nice, but it only gets you so far. And then reporting helps develop a constant feedback loop. And that's one, like I said, one of the places that people are weakest, because usually people get the report and they kind of read it and they're like, ah, cool story, bro. But like you never get anything back from it. So I want to know if that's what's happening, right? Like I want to know if you're not getting anything out of my daily roll up or anything like that, then I'd want to know that, because that's time I'm spending on something that you're not caring about, right? I could be using my efforts towards something else more important. So like I said before, reporting should tell a story. It begins with requirements and it ends with feedback. And both of those things are driven by the customer or the leadership or whoever it is, but begins with requirements and ends with feedback. So you want to always answer the who, what, when, where, why, how when you're doing these reports. Like I said, there's a report structure with a title, an executive summary, which is like a bluff bottom line up front, because you want it to be so that if a C-level is picking up this report, he can just read, or I'm sorry, they can just read it. And like instantly know what the report is, right? Like what it's about and stuff. They don't need to get into the technical details of it or anything like that, which will follow, right? Because other people might be very interested in how that happens. Or maybe your C-level is very technical and they want to know, about that stuff. So it's always good to include it. But executive summary, bottom line up front, just that's good. What, so what, what's next? And then references, appendix, indicators. So those are the actionable parts of it, right? Potentially machine readable if there's a way of ingesting that. And we'll talk about that when we get to technology. And then what tradecraft you used. And that goes back to the frameworks and stuff like that. Like, how did you come to this conclusion, right? So what next is basically answering those who, what, when, where, why questions. But if you can answer what, so what happened, so what, this is how it affected us, what next, this is what we need to do, right? That tells a story right there. Dissemination is a big part of reporting. So you have the internal communications, like the people who need to know internally, like what's going on and what happened and like what's actionable for them, from leadership all the way down to the tier 1 SOC analyst. And then, you have the repository. So if a CTI product is written, you want to store it. So you have prosperity there. So if it happens again, I'm not just sitting there like, oh God, when did it happen? Where did I see this before or anything like that? Make sure that you put it into a SharePoint or a database that is searchable. I'm losing words. So you'll be able to go back and look at it. But yeah, so reporting, make it relevant, make it actionable, make it timely, make it concise, and then you're good to go. Okay, so getting into the collection plan, this is the 3, right? So I said threat profile, and then IRs, the intelligence requirements, and the collection plan is the last of those 3, right? So you're going to have internal sources, you're going to have external sources, internals at the bottom, externals up at the top here that you can see. It's just a nice graphic that I used to use when I would be talking to clients. So this is where, we're looking at the technology and how it comes into play. Having a collection plan, like I mentioned, it helps identify the gaps of where they are and your needs of what's coming in. It also helps you when you go to reassess it later, right? Because you might have to look at it and see, like, is this really helping us? Like the story I mentioned before. It also helps you do a proof of concept with your tools and your feeds. And yeah, just gives you visibility into everything. I'm going to gloss over this really, really fast because I have a lot more to get to still. So this also plays into orchestration because you're going to have things like a threat intel platform. That's one of the tools you should always look at. So you're looking at an anomaly or a threat connect, and you want integration into other tools that might possibly be being used into a SOC, like a SIM, like Splunk, and then feeds going into that. You're also thinking about data visualization, like something like Multigo. A lot of tips have visualization built into it now, so maybe it might not be an extra expense you need to spend. There are investigative tools like Recorded Future that just are amazing and give like full historical background and history and all that kind of stuff. IOC lookups like domain tools, like I mentioned, the library and repository for your reporting, and data from internal and external sources like you've seen here, and then vendor feeds, the paid and free, which, like beware, because you don't want just the indicator, but the context around them that I mentioned before. So this is one of my favorite slides, and I completely stole it. Gave credit at the bottom. Andreas is a great friend of mine. If you're not following him on Twitter already, please do. He is a European-based threat intelligence analyst, and being over there and working, I realized that their view on threat intel is completely different, and their approach and everything like that. And so I really loved getting out of my comfort of the US and being able to go work over in the EU and see how they do things. And so he developed this slide. I think it shows very smartly the tactical, operational, strategic side of CTI focus and stakeholders. You can see how things get played in here with who is interested and who you should really reach out to and talk to and work with when you are in these when you want to communicate with these specific swim lanes. So I thought this was a very smart slide. We're going to get a little bit more in, this is stakeholders, right? So we're going to get a little bit more into the people aspect of that people process technology, because all of that stuff that I just mentioned was all process, right? So this part is the part that might interest you, and I have about 10 minutes to cover the last 4 slides, really. But it's mostly about the process or the people. And so if you're looking about getting into threat intelligence, one of my biggest pet peeves is that everybody thinks that it's super easy. It's really not. It might be a little bit less technical than something like reverse engineering or writing code and all that kind of stuff. But as you can see, there are a lot of complexities to just having a program in itself. But if you find yourself as a critical thinker, naturally curious, I used to use one of those memes where it's kind of like, you know, I think my boyfriend's cheating on me or something like that, and then the friend has her FBI hat on. You know what I mean? I just honestly think women have a really natural propensity for finding things online. So I am happy to speak to this group further about that, because I think that, you know, there's a lot of talent here. But with cyber analysts, here are some core competencies and skills. I pulled this from an INSA report, and the reference is there at the bottom. It was a great report on kind of like what makes a well-rounded threat intel analyst. So I will say report writing is a critical skill. It's something, you know, like when I was talking about reporting, it's one of the biggest parts of our job. So being able to write reports well and in a timely manner is huge, because you don't want something that's full of grammatical or inaccuracies or, you know, spelling errors and stuff, because that's just off-putting when you're presenting it, especially to like a C-level or leadership. So diversity on teams is huge, and I don't mean just diversity in like race, which is also very good, but I also mean like from backgrounds, right? Because I know that I'm coming in with my own biases from how I grew up culturally, or where I grew up in California or whatever it is. And so having various backgrounds, various interests, just diversified teams really helps round out the analysis, and it helps counter that unconscious bias that we bring in. It's been said, reporters and journalists, I totally agree. They're a staple to good threat intel teams. Tech writers that work under pressure are used to short deadlines, so they're amazing. So look at reporters and journalists if you're looking to hire. Researchers, librarians, etc. So here's a little bit more deeper into threat intelligence and the competencies that go along with it. I just wanted to touch on a couple of trainings really quickly. SANS FOR 578 is amazing. I took it with Rob Lee. I don't think he's teaching that course anymore, but he's one of the people who wrote it. Rebecca Brown is there. I think Katie Nichols is a teacher there. You know, we just have a lot of really great teachers at SANS, and I think 578 was one of the best courses I could have possibly ever taken for my career. So 100% think that that's something, if you're interested in threat intelligence, try to get your company to pay for it, because it's wonderful. Along with that, I took 402, which is SEC 402, which is cybersecurity writing and hack the reader. It's by Lenny Zeltzer. He's amazing. Also follow him on Twitter if you haven't already. He gives a lot of really good ideas and feedback. So there's that. And then effective information security writing with Chris Sanders. Yeah, so that talks about the skill sets. And then I just want to mention quickly about unconscious bias. I kind of said it with diversity in teams. There is the psychological phenomenon that is just one of several cognitive biases that hampers critical thinking, and as a result, the validity of our decisions and ultimately our analysis. So this is a bit of a busy slide, but I did that purposely because I wanted to show you that there are a ton of biases that you might have and you're not aware of. And like one for sure when it comes to being a threat intel analyst is the availability bias, which is the human tendency to overthink. To think that an example of things that come readily to mind are a representative, and in that case specifically. So you might just know something from the past and it might block you from something new coming in. So it's definitely worth thinking about, especially if you're going into analysis. The best ways to counteract it are be aware that there are common biases and they can skew cybersecurity strategies, and understanding and overcoming, building awareness of the cognitive biases can help make us smarter, more accurate decisions, and more importantly, help us avoid designing systems and processes that perpetuate our own biases in technology. So going back to that huge like design, implementation, orchestrate kind of thing, I have 5 minutes left. Implementation is happening here, right? This is how threat intelligence fits into it all together. And it's all working together, hopefully harmoniously, but this is what we build for. This is threat intelligence, and it reaches out to everything, right? Vulnerability management, the SOC, leadership, everything. So you're building those teams, you're taking a deliberate approach to building the team, strategic, operational, tacticals, the skills that are needed, all of that kind of stuff. You're looking at the process, internal integrations with other teams, and the methodology and frameworks along with that, with the kill chain and MITRE and everything. It's just all coming together now, right? Like this is where it's happening. This is the slide I talked about where it's strategic, tactical, operational, and then it brings in that technical aspect. So it shows all the different little parts of it. This is from Anissa, again, from Europe, and it's just fantastic. I would check that out, how they put this graph together. And then lastly, we have phase 3, embed and optimize, right? So you're here, you've had the initial where you did the assessment, you've managed it, so you're coming together, building all the information together, you're asking all the right questions, you're building your products, threat profile, intelligence requirements collection plans. It's repeatable, it's scalable. You're getting information in from internal sources, you're bringing it together with outside, you're confirming with outside sources and your community, you're writing these reports, you're getting feedback. It's all awesome. It's working together. So what's next? And you want to still keep thinking about that risk reduction, right? Like how you can help build and scale the program. You're looking at fusion and historical analysis. This is where you do deep dives into your past incidents and your historical data and scouring tickets for trend analysis. And then you're looking at them in accordance with the requirements and how they fit into there. And if the incident did happen, would you be able to prevent or detect it again? And the requirements will tell you. You start developing metrics. You're looking at generating intel. And this isn't, again, just regurgitating reports. You're doing information and community sharing. You have your team. You want to keep them together, especially for continuity's sake. Training, take them to lunch or coffee, build trust through transparency. You're having that communication. Threat modeling, tabletop exercises, all of that. So last slide, lesson learned. Intelligence is not is a product and a process. It begins with the requirements and ends with feedback, both from the customer, client, stakeholder, leadership. Beware of your biases, evaluate your program periodically. Communication, always seek feedback, use the right terms because words matter. Make sure you're telling a story, build your organization's threat profile. It's dynamic, it'll be ever changing. So yeah, if you, a cybersecurity program is only as good as the information contained within. It needs to be evaluated periodically to ensure the information and processes in place are still appropriate for your business. So I don't think we have time for questions. I'm just going to say really briefly, this is how you get a hold of me. I know I just talked a lot for 50 minutes. I'm sorry if it was just so overwhelming, but all of this information is out there. It's readily available to you. So please, go out and find it. And then, please keep in touch. I'm always on LinkedIn and Twitter. And these are the organizations that I'm super involved in. So please follow them on Twitter as well. And I think I'm done. Unless there's any questions. Do we have time for questions?
We do have 2 questions if you want to answer them with the last 2 or 3 minutes. And then we'll switch over. They're in the chat box currently.
Oh, I can't see the chat. I'm sorry. I'm not even in the thing. Can you just tell me?
Yes. So one of the questions is, how much of a threat intel program is built in response to past attacks to companies versus threat intel programs built with fresh eyes?
So I would say very rarely is it built with fresh eyes. It's almost always a reactive thing to a past attack, because people then realize that's something that they needed. I wish it was more of a proactive approach. Very, very rarely is it though. In my past experiences, almost every single time I've walked into an environment, it's because something happened and they realized they needed the resource of a threat intel program. I hope that answered that.
Great. And then the last question is, do you primarily use native tools or do you write down custom playbooks in Python, etc.?
When I say it's not technical, it's not as that technical. And one of the things that I didn't actually get to mention, sorry, with hiring for your teams is maybe you decide that you need a more bespoke program, a sim for your environment, right? Maybe you can't just use something that's commercial off the shelf or out of the box or whatever it is. And so you decide to write your own like MISP instance or something. And if that's the case, then you need somebody on the team who knows how to write those queries and who knows how to implement them and have it orchestrate well with all of your other tools and everything like that. So you might actually hire somebody who's not natively threat intelligence to be on your team, but understands what threat intel needs, but also understands what engineering needs too. So I would say almost always, it's always been a commercial sort of thing for me, but I have been in those environments where we did more of a bespoke MISP or, like I said, Stix Taxi or any of those kind of things where it just worked better for the environment that I was in. It's really just kind of like one of those things you define when you're doing your baseline assessment.
Wonderful. Well, we cannot thank you enough. This was very informative, and we will provide the recordings and any other information you have for them after. So thank you again.
Thank you, guys.